There is a village in southern China where dying young means making it to 85. In Bama County, Guangxi Province, 1 in every 100,000 residents lives past 110 years old. That is 40 times the global average. They drink a tea every single morning that their great-great-grandparents drank before the Communist Revolution. This plant climbs, not upward like ivy, not randomly like weeds. It spirals counterclockwise, always counterclockwise, wrapping around bamboo and trees with a precision that looks deliberate. When you crush the leaves between your fingers, they smell sweet. Not floral sweet, not fruit sweet, sweet like licorice, like anise, like something your grandmother warned you about but never explained why. The vine produces 5-leafed clusters, always 5, never 4, never 6. The Chinese noticed this 800 years ago. They called it the herb of immortality, not because people lived forever, because in the mountain villages where this plant grew wild, people forgot what it meant to die before 100. The longest living humans in China have been drinking this plant for centuries. Most Americans have never heard its name, Jiaogulan. The history of Jiaogulan begins in famine. During the Ming Dynasty, southern China experienced crop failures that lasted 3 consecutive years. Millions starved. Imperial records describe villagers in the Guangxi Mountains surviving by boiling leaves, roots, and bark. Most of these foods were toxic. Most of these villages disappeared. But in Bama County, something different happened. The villagers discovered a vine growing in the limestone caves where they took shelter. It thrived in darkness. It required almost no soil. When they boiled the leaves because they had nothing else, they noticed the tea was sweet, not bitter like most wild plants. Sweet enough to drink without honey, without sugar, without anything to mask the taste. They did not just survive, they thrived. During the worst famine in regional history, Bama County recorded fewer deaths than neighboring provinces during years of abundance. The imperial census noted this. Local officials investigated. The report filed in 1406 attributed the anomaly to mountain herbs and superior moral character. The herbs were Jiaogulan. The moral character was irrelevant. By the Qing dynasty, Jiaogulan was no longer survival food. It was daily practice. Farmers drank it before working the rice terraces. Elders consumed it to maintain strength into their 80s and 90s. Families served it at every meal the way Americans serve water. No one called it to medicine. No one needed to. They just kept not dying. In 1970, the Chinese government conducted the first national census that included rural mountain villages. The results were impossible. Bama County had 3,160 residents. Of those, 74 were over 100 years old. That is a centenarian rate of 2,341 per base from some 100,000, nearly 50 times higher than the United States today. Investigators arrived expecting fraud. They found birth records, family genealogies, elderly residents who remembered events from the 19th century with disturbing clarity. They found something else too. Every single household grew the same vine. Every single family drank the same tea. Every sunrise, as far back as collective memory reached. The plant was strategic. The plant was local. The plant was free. And then the researchers arrived. In 1976, Japanese researchers were studying ginseng alternatives. Ginseng was expensive, over-harvested, took 7 years to mature. They needed something cheaper, faster, more accessible. They found Jiaogulan growing in the same Chinese mountains where centenarians clustered. When they analyzed the chemical composition, they found gypenosides, saponins nearly identical to the ginsenosides in Korean ginseng. Except Jiaogulan contained over 80 different gypenosides. Ginseng contained 28. The researchers published their findings in academic journals. The Japanese government classified Jiaogulan as a promising botanical. The Chinese government saw something different. They saw a plant that had kept rural populations healthy for centuries, being discovered by foreign scientists. They saw traditional knowledge being extracted, patented, monetized. In 1985, China restricted Jiaogulan export and began studying the plant themselves. But by then, the global market had already moved. Japanese supplement companies began cultivating Jiaogulan domestically. Korean researchers started clinical trials. Western scientists requested samples, and the plant that had belonged to mountain villages for 800 years became an international commodity. The villagers of Bama County kept drinking their tea. They did not need studies to tell them what worked. They did not need universities to confirm what their great-grandparents already knew. They just kept outliving everyone who did not have access. In 2011, researchers at Taipei Medical University in Taiwan confirmed what Chinese centenarians had known for centuries. They isolated gypenoside extracts from Jiaogulan and applied them to human cells. The results were published in the journal Acta Pharmacologica Sinica. Jiaogulan activated AMPK and upregulated SIRT1, the same pathways that metformin and resveratrol target. A 2015 study from Guangxi Medical University tested Jiaogulan on mice bred to develop Alzheimer's-like cognitive decline. The mice showed significantly reduced amyloid plaque formation, published in Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine. In 2017, researchers at Konkuk University in South Korea fed Jiaogulan to obese mice. The mice lost weight, improved insulin sensitivity, reduced inflammatory markers, published in Nutrients, peer-reviewed journal indexed by the National Institutes of Health. Cross-species, cross-institutional, replicated results, confirming Jiaogulan activates the same pathways that pharmaceutical companies spend billions trying to target. Here is how the FDA classifies food. If a substance was regularly consumed in the United States before 1958, it is generally recognized as safe. GRAS status. No approval needed. Jiaogulan was not consumed in America before 1958. Jiaogulan is foreign. Jiaogulan requires proof. The approval process costs between $1 and $5 million. Clinical trials, safety documentation, regulatory compliance, legal fees, all paid by the company seeking approval. And here is the problem. Jiaogulan is a plant. You cannot patent a plant. Any company that spends millions proving Jiaogulan is safe simply opens the market for every competitor to sell the same product at lower prices. No profit margin justifies the investment, so no company applies. So Jiaogulan remains in regulatory limbo. You can buy it as a dietary supplement with no health claims on the label. You can find dried leaves imported from China, often marked for tea to avoid FDA scrutiny. But you cannot buy it fresh in grocery stores. You cannot see advertisements explaining what it does. You cannot find it recommended by mainstream health authorities. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical industry generates $450 billion annually in the United States. Metformin works by activating AMPK. Jiaogulan activates AMPK. Metformin requires a prescription and costs money. Jiaogulan grows on a vine. Rapamycin works by inhibiting mTOR and promoting autophagy. Jiaogulan promotes autophagy. Rapamycin has serious side effects and costs thousands per year. Jiaogulan tastes like licorice and costs nothing if you grow it yourself. Resveratrol supplements generate over $100 million in annual sales by activating SIRT1. Jiaogulan activates SIRT1 more effectively. But resveratrol has marketing. Resveratrol has branding. Resveratrol has companies with the resources to promote it. Jiaogulan has centenarians in Chinese mountain villages. And centenarians do not buy supplements. Here is what the regulatory system does not control. Your ability to grow a plant. Jiaogulan is legal to cultivate in the United States. Seeds are available from botanical suppliers. Live plants shipped from nurseries operating outside mainstream agricultural commerce. The vine is hardy across most of the United States. It tolerates partial shade, prefers well-drained soil, survives neglect better than most vegetables. One vine produces hundreds of leaves per season. Fresh leaves can be eaten raw or dried for tea. prepared the way the centenarians of Bama have done for centuries. The plant is perennial, returning denser each season. A single planting provides decades of harvest. No one can revoke your access. No regulatory change can remove a vine from your garden. No approval process governs what you grow in your own soil. The centenarians of Bama did not wait for studies. They did not wait for FDA clearance. They did not wait for permission. They drank the tea. They outlived everyone who did not. Every seed planted is knowledge transferred outside the system that decides which foods Americans are allowed to access. Every vine grown is a small act of medical autonomy. Every cup of tea is a choice that generates no profit for industries built on your dependence. The vine climbs counterclockwise, always counterclockwise. The pattern is not random, the pattern is instruction. What grows upward can be harvested. What can be harvested cannot be controlled. What cannot be controlled cannot be sold. Jiaogulan, the herb of immortality. The name is not metaphor, the name is observation. In the villages where this plant has always grown, people live longer. Not because of medicine, not because of intervention, because they never stopped drinking what their great-grandparents taught them to value. The knowledge is no longer secret. The choice of action is wholly yours.